And when you knock us down, we're going to get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off.
Go ahead and say it, Ed. Go Tigers!
When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
You like that? You like that?
F it. Jamar's down there somewhere.
The New Orleans Saints select Marcus Davenport.
No!
Splash Brothers? Yeah.
It's playoff. Keep going, Brace.
The playoffs? Don't talk about playoffs.
If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
And the ability to do this as we really enjoy it, and we're doing it in your name and fellowshipping in your name, Lord, and just we really wouldn't be able to do any of this without you, Lord, and we just appreciate you giving us the ability and the time to be able to do something that we love, and in your name we pray, amen. All right, we're going to jump right on in. First, go over a little bit about our bust picks and what we think about those. Bust picks to us are players, in our opinion, that seem like they're being drafted higher in drafts than compared to how we think they will produce in fantasy compared to the other players being drafted around them and in their production that we think will probably be less than what they're being drafted as. So in a nutshell, in our opinion, these players will not produce as well as their current average draft position or their ADP. And that's just kind of a brief, a brief definition of bust picks to us, and as we're going to go over. But first, we definitely want to thank our sponsors, Big Reed BBQ, Automotive Detailing Solutions, This Little Piggy Barbecue Food Truck, and Mimi's Children's Boutique. We really appreciate y'all coming out and supporting our podcast and Dirty Boot Sports, and just kind of thank y'all for stepping up and supporting us as much as y'all do. We really appreciate it. And all these people have really good products. Today we're going to talk about and highlight one of our sponsors, Automotive Detailing Solutions, on this pod today. Automotive Detailing Solutions is not the usual car wash. ADS provides intricate detailing to groom your vehicle inside and out, focusing on quality over quantity. From carpet and seat extractions to paint polishing, ADS strives to be Jackson Parish's premier automotive detailer. Contact Matthew Smith at 318-475-9492. Add them on Facebook, or just ask the guys from Dirty Boot Sports about the ADS experience. Matt does a great job. I have not heard anybody ever complain about anything he does. He does a great job, and I promise you won't be disappointed if you go to Matt at Automotive Detailing Solutions. But after that, we appreciate you, Matt, supporting us, and we hope you're listening, and maybe we can help you out with your fantasy team. And I'm going to welcome in Josh. How you doing this evening?
Oh, pretty good.
Yep, you ready to talk about some bust picks?
I'm ready.
All right, we're going to cover some quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends that we'll think will bust their expectations of ADP this year. Most of the ADP and numbers and rankings projections we're using either a combination of ESPN and Fantasy Pros. Most of it's ESPN projections, but I do have some Fantasy Pros information mixed in there and some of their statistics. We appreciate being able to use their websites to get their stats from. But let's go ahead and open it up with your bust quarterback, Josh.
All right. Well, my bust is going to be Anthony Richardson this year. I just think he's being drafted way too high. Fantasy Pros has him as ADP of number 16. In front of guys we have all talked about on this podcast, like Jared Goff, Russell Wilson, Derek Carr, Matthew Stafford, who have all proven already what they can do. And then we got a rookie coming in that they're already putting way ahead of these guys, and he hasn't proven anything. I just think he's been drafted way too high. He's got a lot of hype coming in the season, and honestly, I'm not even sure if he's the best rookie, out there. He definitely wasn't drafted as the best rookie coming into the season. He's on a team that was very bad last year. They were 4-12-1. His running back is in a standoff with the team, which could hurt him. Is he going to make a big improvement in this team? I'm really not so sure. I mean, he's big, he's athletic,
Yep.
but the knock on him is his accuracy as a passer.
That's right.
Will he be able to improve before he's got an edge rusher breathing down his neck?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, like, yes, he played in the SEC at Florida against some of the top talent, but you will hear quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, every one of them tell you it's nothing like when you come to the NFL and everybody is as fast as the fastest player you played against in college. Every one of them. Like, they all talk about how much faster everybody is, how much stronger everybody is. He has not played against anything like this, and it was the SEC. But you got to think, they only had most of the teams, minus maybe Alabama, LSU, most of the teams he played against only had 3 or 4 NFL players on them. Maybe. You know what I mean? Because, it's just not – there's just not that many that get drafted every year, even though it's the SEC, that's better talent than the rest of college football for the most part. But they're still not playing against NFL quality teams. And you just can't simulate that. And the only thing he's got going for him is he's got Michael Pittman, he's got Alec Pierce, 2 pretty talented wide receivers. That's about it. His tight ends are suspect at best. They didn't really do much last year. He's got some athletic ones, but he's got 2 down the field big wide receivers that he can just chunk the ball to. But that's a gamble in itself. And if he runs after he misses his first progression and they're not open and he takes off, how long is he going to stay healthy? Because if I'm not mistaken, he's big and he's thick, but he's not near as big and thick as Josh Allen, and he's been one of the few running quarterbacks to take as many hits as he has and stay as healthy as he has. Go ahead.
I feel like he's in kind of the same situation that Justin Fields was as a rookie. Mm-hmm. He finished 31.
Yep.
His rookie year.
That's
I feel like he's kind of just getting thrown into a bad situation.
Yep.
He's a very athletic quarterback, just like Fields. But I don't know if he's ready to process at the NFL level yet or make the decisions, that a lot of these guys that's behind him can.
Yep.
The game basically is going to be won in the pocket. And you're going to have to make accurate throws in the pocket to win some games. And I just don't think he's ready yet. Maybe in 2 or 3 years, we might be talking, like we are about Fields, chance to break the top 10, definitely. Top 5.
Yeah.
But right now, I think he struggles, especially the first half of the year.
Yep.
So to me, just sit back, see what he does. If you see him improve, you want to take a shot and get him, off the waiver wire halfway through the year. But I just cannot see drafting him as high. Because
123 on ESPN.
Yeah. There's too many other quarterbacks I would rather have behind him. And I just don't see him as a rookie on a bad team finishing inside the top 20.
Yeah. One of the stats that was pretty interesting that I did hear is any quarterback that has had 150 rushes over a year, which if he's a primary running quarterback like Lamar, Hurts, Fields, they all run around that much every year. None of them, anytime they've ran 150 times, have ever finished like outside the top 5, I think. So, and that's where like Fields broke that mark last year. He ran over 150 times. I believe Hurts did as well. And then Lamar has in the past. He didn't last year because obviously he sat out so much. But that's what a lot of these analysts. But my thing is, if they're not winning and they have the potential to, and he looks terrible, he has the best backup behind him in the league in Gardner Minshew. So you could draft him. He could run a lot, get you some points for like 2-3 weeks, but they're not winning and looking bad. They might bench him and put Gardner Minshew in.
Yes, I totally agree.
it's just a big gamble. He could be something special, but I'm like you. I think he's more like Justin Fields. He plays, maybe gets benched, that he plays some more toward the end of the year, and next year maybe he takes a step forward. But yeah, he's getting drafted too high around a lot of guys that I think can finish in that top. Anywhere between 8 to 12 range, and they're getting drafted way later. And I just don't know if he's going to do that, because I don't know if he's going to play all year or not.
Well, I don't understand why not easy man. Let Minshew, play, and if Minshew don't do good, I don't know. I just think throw him to the wolves.
Packages. Just have some packages where he comes in, runs a series or something, just to see how he, which I guess they're doing that preseason, but it's still hard to tell in preseason.
Well, and let's be honest, most quarterbacks drafted in the first round don't make it.
That's right. A lot.
Most of them don't.
You're exactly right. But anyway, I think it's a great pick. I think he's being overdrafted as well, and I think he starts to slide. The hype was up, and then he hasn't looked that great in the preseason. He's been sliding. Honestly, a lot of picks, some of my guys that I'm going to talk about tonight, you have seen them, their ADP has changed a fair amount just based off the preseason. And we're seeing a lot of adjustment to that. And honestly, to me, it seems like people are adjusting quicker this year than they have in the past.
Oh, it's changing like day to day, week to week for sure.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the hype is coming off of Hurts and Fields' success. They're just expecting him to be the next one doing the same thing.
Everybody forgets how it did. None of them did it their first year.
No, it was the second and third year before they really.
Yep.
So,
but rolling on, I'm going to go ahead and jump on into mine. My bust this year, unfortunately, is a local guy that I really like as a person and a player, but it has more to do with his offensive situation than his talent. He is aging a little bit, but his situation has just been on the decline for the last couple of years with injuries and coaching changes this year. And that's going to be Dak Prescott for Dallas. He's going ADP around 98 point. It says 98.7, so around 98, which is right around 98 in a 10-team draft is going to be right around 10th round. So you're drafting him fairly early. 98 overall also is going to put you, like, just to give you an idea, some of the players that are getting drafted. Like, for one, he's getting drafted ahead of Tua, Rodgers, Smith, Wilson, Kirk Cousins, right after Trevor Lawrence and Watson. But 98 is going to get you right around Sky Moore, Jacoby Myers, Juju, Brian Robinson, somewhere in there. But to me, with the quarterback, like we've talked about before on the pod, if you don't get one of those top tier, like Josh and I were talking about right before, pretty much the last straw is Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence, and both of us are kind of shooting somewhere around a Fields Herbert, which is around 64.5. After that, there's a lot of guys that we like more than going for Dak Prescott right there in that 98 range. And just some of the reasons, I mean, for one, he's the 10th quarterback being drafted total. And I don't think there's any way he finishes as QB 10 at the end of the year. With some of these guys in better situations, with a better offensive coordinator calling the plays. And honestly, Dallas's offensive line has not been the same as it had been in the last several years. They've lost some guys. They've had a lot of injuries. They did get Zach Martin finally signed back this year, which was big for them, but I don't think they really added anybody to note. And I'm not really understanding where they're getting all these projections from. There's been a lot of negative impacts this offseason. First of all, his fast-paced, pass-friendly offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, has left town. he went to the Chargers, who's now with Justin Herbert, which is another reason Josh and I are super high on Justin Herbert, because he's actually got a really solid, good offensive scheme, pass-happy, high-powered, high-efficient offensive coordinator that left Dallas, and now
wasn't they the highest scoring team or number two? That was one or two last year.
They were up there, but I'll be honest, their defense scored a lot of points for them. But they were very fast paced. They ran more plays. I want to say more plays per minute or something. They were up there in like the top 10 as far. And obviously, we all know volume's king. And so the more plays you run in a game, the more stats you're going to have. So if you slow the game down, which is what his new play caller and head coach, Mike McCarthy, has said he wants to do, is slow the game down, run the ball more to give his defense a breather, more time to catch their breath and recover while the offense is on the field. If he wants to run the ball more, that's going to take the ball out of Dak Prescott's hands more. He's not going to throw as much, not going to cruise many stats. I mean,
if you just take 20% away, that's a lot of passes.
Oh, yeah. And, I mean, some of the stats that I looked up, all right, so and also another thing McCarthy said, he plain said in an interview, he doesn't care about putting up a lot of points. Hello.
Yeah.
I mean, trust me, if you win and you say that, more power to you. But as far as fantasy analysts that we are, paying attention to stuff like that, if he don't care about scoring, then he don't care about putting up fantasy points.
Well, he's banking on their defense to be good, which I think they will be good.
They will be.
Yeah.
And if he slows the ball down, that could work for him. But it's not going to work for Dak Prescott's fantasy production.
It might be good for football, but it won't be good for fantasy.
That's right. So some of the stats I looked up, since 2019, Dak Prescott hasn't rushed for more than 200 yards. Okay? That's less than 200 yards since 2019.
And that's not going to go up with his injury history.
And he has a total of 5 touchdowns in 3 seasons. Total of 5 rushing touchdowns, sorry. But 5 rushing touchdowns in 3 seasons. So not only is he not getting those little quick, punch ins right down there, those little end arounds where he just kind of runs it in like he was there for a couple years. 5 total rushing touchdowns in 3 seasons. All right. And so the rushing upside that he once possessed is gone. And I just don't see him being inside the top 15 at the best if he doesn't have any rushing upside and they slow the game down. But that's just, once again, like I said, this is all in my opinion, my speculation. But also, people might forget Mike McCarthy, when he first took over the team, he took over play calling for Kellen Moore when he was there. Kellen Moore was there, but Mike McCarthy was calling the plays. The offense was so bad that he gave Kellen Moore the play calling back. I remember the press conference talking about, well, we're gonna let Kellen Moore take back over the play calling because the offense has been, not as efficient as it was, blah, blah, blah. Essentially, Mike McCarthy was terrible at the play calling because offense and defense has changed so much since he did play calling back when he was at Green Bay. It's just not as effective anymore with him making that call. So I think a combination of Mike McCarthy, Dak Prescott losing some rushing ability, the offense getting slowed down with Mike McCarthy, and Kellen Moore being gone and his scheming, I think Dak takes another step back. Even, he's been injured the last couple of years, so it's really slowed him down. Like last year, he played in 12 games. But I
got 2 points I was going to make too.
Yeah, go for it, man.
So a lot of people forget he led the NFL in interceptions last year. Yep. And like you said, only played 12 games and still led the NFL in interceptions. Those are points against you.
Yep.
And, I don't see that probably going away. He's going to have double-digit interceptions with more games especially. And the other point I was going to make is one of his favorite targets is not there no more. his tight end, Dalton Schultz.
Yep. And yeah,
that was kind of his dump off when he couldn't find nobody. So that's two other things that's kind of against him.
And to me, he still has the weapons. I mean, he still has Lamb. He's got Cooks now. James Ferguson is their tight end to replace Schultz, who had several red zone touchdowns last year and actually filled in admirably for, I think it's James Ferguson. I have to look up, but it's Ferguson's his last name. He filled in fine when Schultz was out last year. And he's not as athletic, but he's pretty close. He's still working on his blocking. He's gotten a lot better. And so he's not terrible, but still, I just don't think the play calling for Dak to throw the ball as much is going to be there as it is going to be hand the ball off to Pollard and let's try to drain some clock so our defense can get some breathing, get a breather instead of having these 3 quick passes. And if you miss on them, then you're 3 and out, and your defense just came off the field a minute ago. I think that's going to be his reasoning. So, and honestly, it just seems like Dak's he's on the decline, and he's being drafted as the Dak of old. I mean, he's like I said, he's being drafted as number 10 quarterback, and I just don't think he runs enough anymore, and his passing volume's not going to be there for him to be drafted that high.
And he's probably not going to play every game because he hasn't the last few years.
Definitely. Yeah, that's something else. I mean, you can't – it's hard to factor in injuries, but whenever every year you come up with some kind of an injury, and his have been bad, some of them. So not only that, but like those type of injuries over time as you get older, they still wear on you. Like some of these that big bad ankle injury he had, like he heals – but he's going to develop an early onset of arthritis eventually, even though he's young. I know that sounds crazy, but that's something that does happen when you have a major trauma like that to a joint or anything like that. You develop an early onset of arthritis from that, and it can be painful. And if it flares up during the middle of the season, who knows? He might have to sit a game or two here and there to try to heal up from it. But that's my quarterback bust. And like Josh and I were talking about, we've got Clay's quarterback bust right here and his points he wanted to make. So we're just kind of read them off. We're going to add a little bit to them, but this one's not going to be as popular on the pod because this is a Louisiana LSU favorite. But Clay's quarterback bust is going to be Joe Burrow. And I can see some of his points he's got here, but I'm going to go through them real quick. So Joe Burrow is the 42nd overall quarterback, 5th round ADP. Hang on one second, and I'll tell you exactly where he's going off, what quarterback. So he's quarterback number 5 going off the board, just ahead of Fields and Herbert, just behind Lamar. But Clay, one of his big arguments, he gets the Louisiana boost because most of our listeners, if not all of them, drafted Louisiana. Everybody loves Joe Burrow. So he typically goes probably around the 4th round somewhere, which is really pretty high for him, honestly, whenever you think about his production of the last couple of years, and especially last year with Justin Fields and Justin Herbert going almost, I think it's about 20 rounds after him. 20 picks after him. So let's see. Burrow's going 42. Yep. And then looks like Fields and Herbert are going 64, 65. And personally to me, and I think Josh feels the same, I'll hear from him here in just a second, but I think that's about where, Joe Burrow would be going to me is around the Fields Herbert area. But instead he's up there around Lamar, who's had a QB1 fantasy year already. So I think that's probably a little too pricey, especially if he gets bumped up from the Louisiana boost. Injuries, he gets injured a little bit every year. He's dealing with one right now. I think he's going to be back, no problem. I think we all feel that way. And then he's playing against the toughest division in football. Apparently, Clay looked it up. He's got the toughest strength of schedule in the league, and that's probably to Clay. Says he thinks he's going to take a step back, and he doesn't think they're going to win the division, but they're going to win 9 or 10 games. So that's obviously, thing is, though, with fantasy, it really doesn't matter if you lose or not, as long as you're throwing and making points. I mean, yeah, obviously we'll want them to win, except for not beat the Saints. But if you're playing from behind, that's going to be more points for the quarterback. So it might not,
I agree.
necessarily be a bad thing if they are losing. It's just, depends on how the other team gets ahead in that game. But and then Clay's last point, last thing you want to say, he's still going to be great. He still loves him. Thanks, Clay. But he doesn't love to draft that high in that position. So I completely understand, and he makes a fair point. What about you, Josh? What do you think about it?
Well, let's don't forget he finished as the 4th quarterback last year.
That's right.
And I don't see him going down from that.
Yeah,
Some of the other quarterbacks might get a little better.
Yeah,
but I think he's pretty steady right about there. I'm not real big on this pick. I mean, I can understand some of the stuff he's saying. But I do think you can get quarterbacks a couple of rounds later.
That's right.
Like Fields.
Yeah.
I mean, and
Herbert,
both. I mean, they could actually be better than him this year from a fantasy standpoint. Maybe not from a quarterback standpoint, but from a fantasy standpoint.
Yeah.
But another thing is, I don't mind drafting players you really like because it's so much more fun to watch a player that you're pulling for the team and that you like. So if you like him, if you're willing to take that 4th or 5th round, on him, I mean, I don't really mind it.
I'll say this. I don't think Joe Burrow's going to lose your season.
No,
let's just say
definitely not.
Some of these guys that I'm talking
barring
about,
injury, no.
Yeah. Some of these guys that I'm going to talk about in a minute, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen with them, but if you draft them, there's a couple on mine. I know one for sure. He might not even play this year. We don't know. And if you draft somebody as high as this guy's going, I'm going to talk about it in a minute, and he doesn't play at all, that will wreck your team.
Well, I got one that could do the same thing.
Yeah. So anyway, but I don't think Joe Burrow's going to lose you. We just think there's better value 20 picks later. Or not better, but equal. Let's say
good.
Equal.
Yeah.
Yes, equal value. I apologize because I wouldn't say better because I think Joe Burrow is going to be in that top 6, 7 for sure every year. Maybe he doesn't finish as 5. Maybe he does because all these other guys, like, honestly, any of them could finish as 5. I mean, let's be honest, or 4.
Well, personally, I believe Herbert probably overtakes him this year. I just think he's going to have a huge year with a new offensive coordinator.
That's exactly right. And they added that stud rookie wide receiver, so now Burrow's got 3 stud wide receivers. They're healthy finally. And so does Herbert. So, and honestly, I'd have to give the edge in the backfield, Eckler to Herbert over Mixon to Burrow. So, the only thing, and they both, now that Burrow's got Orlando Brown on the offensive line, with Herbert having Penei Sewell and Rashawn Slater back, I mean, it's pretty close. And honestly, Herbert might have the better offensive line, and Herbert's got Gerald Everett. Yeah, I mean,
definitely has the better wide receivers.
I'll tell you, man, if Cincinnati plays the Chargers, man, I might have to just cancel my plans and sit down and watch that game, whatever it is. I mean, because that seems like that would be a heck of a game to watch, just to sit down. I mean, there's some good ones, but just to see Herbert and Burrow go back and forth.
Slinging it across the field, yeah.
So, but anyway, that's going to wrap up our quarterbacks. We're going to roll right on into our running backs. Josh, tell us about this running back that you've got that you don't think that might not even play this year. Tell them who you got.
I got Josh Jacobs. He probably will play, but we all know what's going on with that.
Yep.
So last year, he led the Raiders with 393 touches, which is outrageous.
Crazy. That's a lot.
He led the league in rushing. He outperformed his ADP big time last year. But heading into 2023, he's got a new quarterback in Jimmy G. Darren Waller has gone to the Giants. They've done nothing to improve the offense. They really don't have a very good defense.
Yep.
And they probably going to fall behind in games, leading to more pass attempts, which is, negative game flow for the running backs. I just feel like Jacob's going to see more stacked boxes from what he done last year. It's just hard for me to believe that he gets anywhere close to what he done last year.
Yep.
I think he drops out of the top 10. I looked up, and 19 through 21, the 3 years before his big year last year, he averaged 13.6 as far as his finishes. So he's usually outside the top 10 anyway.
Yeah.
I just think he had one of those crazy years where he just, had the best year of his career.
Yeah.
And just everything went right for him. I think, let's see. And let's don't forget the contract situation.
Oh, yeah.
As far as I know, he hasn't reported to the Raiders camp.
Nope. Still hasn't.
We don't even know if you draft him if he'll play the first game or
That's right.
second, or who knows when. So his average draft position is 24. And if you check the rankings, this guy is all over the place. One of the guys from ESPN had him ranked 10.
Yep.
I seen Matthew Berry had him ranked 21. He's just all over the place.
And to me, when you see something like that, that right there should scare you too, because some of these people are like, a lot of these people don't have any idea where to rank him. They're just speculating just like we are. And, when you got to draft somebody that high, you don't want somebody that is an unknown. But anyway, go ahead. Keep going, Josh. Sorry, but yeah.
Well, so average draft pick at 24. So what's that, the first of the third round?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, first.
So,
yep. And ESPN's actually got him at 19 on this top 300. Now, Fantasy Pros has him at 24, I believe.
So,
but
19, that's the end of the second round.
That's exactly right.
All the wide receivers, because from looking at drafts, I believe in the fourth or fifth round, you can get a really, really good running back.
Chris Olave is going 25th.
So if you pick a wide receiver or even another running back besides him, I feel like you're going to be able to get another running back that could produce better playing a full season.
Yeah.
At fourth or fifth round.
Not saying that you'll get this, but he's going one pick after Chubb.
That's crazy.
One pick after Chubb. Okay. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry, but I was just looking. That's as far as the PPR top 300 for ESPN. One pick after Nick Chubb. Josh Jacobs.
No, it's just everything's just going against him into the season.
Too many question marks. There's a chance he gets traded. What if he gets traded to a team for a timeshare? Because now he's being drafted as if he's not in a timeshare. What if it's another Breece Hall, Dalvin Cook situation? Then they should be getting drafted around that area. And I think you're completely right. If anything, now he could fall to a value, but I don't think you take him before you take a Breece Hall or you take a Dalvin Cook, because if he does get traded, they're saying he could go to Kansas City. They're saying he could go to Denver. Either one of those teams, he's going to be in a timeshare. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, but like we were saying earlier, first and second rounds, third round even, it has to be sure somebody is going to be on the field for you.
Exactly.
And you can trust in it. And I just can't trust in this guy with everything that's going on. And he's really never done it like he done it last year.
He's always been a big volume play. Big volume.
And if he got that many touches last year, the wear and tear on his body is going to come up at some point too.
That's right.
It's just a lot of things going against him going into the year.
Yeah.
And I just cannot. Somebody probably will. Because of the name and because of what he done last year, somebody might have had him last year and it's like, oh, he won me the league. I got to pick him.
Yep.
But I just personally, I can't see him in the first 3 rounds.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. And like Josh and I talked about earlier today, there was one of two people that I was going to pick, and it was Josh Jacobs or the guy that I did pick. And we were communicating because we both want to talk about, we're trying not to double cover because we're only covering one person, one player a person with some of these picks. And I was glad to hear him covering him because I felt like he needed to be talked about because Josh pretty much just said everything that we need to think about with him. There's too many question marks going, and he's probably not going to have the volume he had last year. And then one last little tidbit that I've thought about with him, Jimmy G does not have a cannon. He cannot stretch the field like Derek Carr could. Derek Carr has a cannon, and he was stretching the field with Davante Adams last year constantly, pushing those safeties back and the corners, pushing the safeties, having to help big deep on Davante Adams. And what does that do when you push the safeties back and your offensive line can get in the second? That opens up lanes for Josh Jacobs. When Jimmy G can't throw a 40-yard out route, those safeties don't have to go as far back whenever they're in coverage because they know Jimmy G can't get that ball down the field. So what's that going to do? That's going to keep those safeties pulled down farther than whatever Derek Carr was there. And I don't think it's going to help Jacobs out at all. I honestly, and not only that, but I just don't think Jimmy G's better than Derek Carr personally. He's had better team situations than Derek Carr, which has made him look better, like in San Francisco and in New England. But this is not a good team situation for Jimmy G. And I just don't think he looks good at all. I really think he comes out, and I think the Raiders are going to be terrible. I think Davante Adams is going to have some kind of a faux injury so he doesn't have to play with them and then request a trade about halfway through.
Well, I'm pretty sure Jacobs is probably the same thing's going to happen. If he plays for him at all, and they play 4 or 5 games and, they're 1-6 or something like that, you don't think they don't want to pay him the rest of the year?
Well, at least they're entertaining trade offers, unlike the team that I'm about to talk about.
You can go ahead and bring yours because they're so similar.
Yeah, and that's going to be Jonathan Taylor for the Colts. I mean, you want to talk about a dumpster fire situation. He's on the PUP list. He requests a trade. They deny the trade. He comes to camp. He leaves camp for a personal matter. Still hasn't returned. Nobody knows, and it's a personal matter, so it could be something very important. Or it could be a personal matter as in he's trying to figure out what he's going to do. And he's discussing
or a personal matter as in they don't want to say what it is because they don't really know.
That's exactly right. But either way, he's not in camp, hasn't been activated off the PUP list yet. We're 3 weeks out from the regular season. That's another thing, Josh. Jacobs ain't practicing either, and we're 3 weeks out. If these guys ain't even practiced with the offense yet, they're not just going to jump in there and have, they've been playing with these teams for a while, but both of them have new quarterbacks. That takes some time to gain that chemistry and gel with those guys, But anyway, Taylor going right behind Jacobs. Right now, he's going right now, let's see, I pulled it up. Pick. So Jonathan Taylor on ESPN is going around pick 20 for PPR, and that's RB9, which is 1 pick after Jacobs. For Fantasy Pros, he's going around pick 28, which is, right there around the 3rd round, somewhere in there. He's the 8th running back being drafted. And honestly, he's still falling, which eventually could be a value depending on if he gets traded or if he does come back. But right now, there's too many question marks for you to risk that high of a pick. And also for a guy that's had several pretty big injuries over the last year that have kept him out, and he's still quote unquote rehabbing his ankle injury. And honestly, probably kind of milking that a little bit after he requested that trade, and then Jim Irsay said no way. He returned to practice for a day, like I was saying. Then he got excused for practice on Wednesday to attend a personal matter, and he's still yet to return as of today, and there's been no estimated time for him to return or no mention to what personal matter he has been excused from practice for. So he's already said he doesn't want to play in Indy anymore. He wants to be traded. And he said also, this was another big one that some of the analysts touched on, he will not begin football activity until he is 100% healthy. Like 100. Now, I don't know about you, Josh, but very rarely, very, very rarely is a running back truly 100% healthy, coming in period. So if he's going to find any and every small thing to cry about to not play, I think that just screams to me to stay away for a third round price that you're going to have to pay.
I'll be very surprised if he plays for the Colts this year.
Yeah, I mean, because it wasn't just Jim Irsay said, well, we're gonna discuss our options. We're gonna talk to him and just kind of see if we can convince him to stay. No, Jim Irsay just straight up said, I'll die before I trade him. So, I mean, that's just like, I don't care. I'll just straight up ain't trading him. And then if I'm Jonathan Taylor, I'm like, well, I guess I'm just gonna, hold out. You just won't have a running back. They did sign who they signed. Hang on. So Kenyon Drake. God bless America. They signed Kenyon Drake.
So he could be running the ball for him the first week.
He could be.
Goodness.
I mean, it could be Kenyon Drake. The other guy that was there last year that did have some success. Hang on, I got the.
Well,
there it is.
I mean, nobody expects them to be a good team this year.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
They got a rookie.
Maybe they
got a
mail
rookie
it in
quarterback
from a draft pick.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. They got a rookie quarterback.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe they're just going to, start over.
Yeah. Deion Jackson. They did draft a rookie, Evan Hull. I think he's a rookie. Hang on, I'll tell you.
If he starts the season with them,
Evan
I don't
Hull
expect
out
him
of
to
Northwestern.
finish.
So they did draft a rookie that's listed above Deion Jackson, who had some success last year. But yeah, man, I mean, it just doesn't look good. And then on top of that, he's got a running quarterback, which can be beneficial, but it also might be one of those situations where they're going to let the running quarterback try to develop on his own, and they're just not going to give Taylor the ball as much as they have in the past. So that could be another thing too. Now, he's still, like, if he was going to play the whole season, he comes back, practices, he's ready to go for week 1. If you can draft him late third round, that could be a value if he's going to play. But I think, like Josh said, and I feel the same way. I think it's a big question mark, and it could. I think, like Jacobs, it's doubtful that he does end up playing this year.
Well, I was big on him going into the year last year. And,
oh yeah, me too.
And I tell you, he did not play well when he played.
Yep, I know.
He
had
look
like
good.
1 or 2 good games right at the beginning, and then that was it. I drafted him, I think, 2nd or 3rd overall in my keeper draft, and I had him. He was my number 1, and my number 2 was Javonte Williams. And yeah, man.
Didn't end well, huh?
Yeah, well, I didn't get last, that's for sure. I think I ended up getting 4th, but it was by pure luck is what it was. But anyway, yeah, so it was rough, but yeah, I was all in because I remember I passed on him the year before when he freaking RB1, and I passed on him in the draft, and I regretted it. And anyway, I was like, you know what? If he's there at 3, I'm going to take him. And sure enough, I think it was 3 because I was going to take McCaffrey because I didn't think they were going to take McCaffrey because he had that injury and they didn't know if he was going to play or not. And anyway, they drafted McCaffrey, and I had Taylor sitting there, and I was like, guess I'll go Taylor. And I did, and anyway.
Well, I won't be having him this year.
No, I won't be drafting that early for sure. And we're going to go ahead and roll on to Clay's pick, another very unpopular one. Especially if you're a homer, Clay thinks Alvin Kamara is going to be a bust this year. And honestly, if he would have said that last year, I'd have probably been more inclined to believe him. But this year, he's done fallen so far, Josh. I mean, I know he's missing 3 games, but pick 44, he's getting drafted 44th overall in the 5th round. I don't think his tank's empty yet. It's definitely not as full as it was. but I don't think he's done. And I really want to see what he can do with a true quarterback in the backfield again. Not with Jameis, not with Andy Dalton, not them running that offense. I want to see a real, true quarterback. Like Andy Dalton, game manager at best. Jameis Winston probably couldn't pull an audible out of his hat if he had to. I want to see him with a true quarterback that can get him the ball. He looked really good catching the ball from Derek Carr in the preseason whenever they played the Saints. Personally, but anyway, I'm gonna get back. Sorry, I'm ruining Clay's bust pick here, but let's go through some of Clay stuff. So he does have a good point. He's gonna get the Louisiana boost. Saints homers, they're gonna draft him higher because they wanna have a piece of the Saints on their team. So he's probably going to be going around the fourth or even the third. I don't think he's going around the third, but I'll tell you right now, Josh, I'd draft him in the third over Jonathan Taylor or Josh Jacobs. That's me, that's because I know he's
I don't
coming
take
back.
any of those in the third.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying if I had to pick one of those three in the third, I'm taking Kamara because I know he's coming back after that suspension and he's going to be the man.
Yeah.
Like, Jamal Williams
he's going to be motivated,
but
I think he's going to be motivated this year too.
And he's going to be fresh coming in because he's going to get that little bit of rest. He looks good now, and then he's going to get a 3-week rest to come really, and then come back in strong. But anyway, another thing Clay said. Obviously, he's missing 3 games. He's had injury problems the last 2 seasons. Very true. He's not as young as he used to be. He's expected to be more of a pass. It's expected to be more of a pass-heavy offense than for the first time in years. But honestly, to me, Clay, I think that benefits Kamara more than it hurts him.
It does too.
Not Jamal Williams, but
because I think they're going to use Jamal Williams to pound it.
Yeah,
and he's going to be more of that get outside and flats and exactly. So they could actually play them both at the same time.
And Clay says he doesn't like him to finish above the guys he's getting drafted ahead of or that have clear paths to 17 games and high volume, such as James Conner, Miles Sanders, Alexander Madison.
I can see that.
Yeah, I really could see him finishing around those guys. So, because I think his efficiency, if the Saints offense pans out, I think their offense is going to be heads and tails better than Arizona's and Carolina's. Now, is it going to be better than Minnesota's? Probably not, but we know Minnesota's is definitely going to be geared more toward getting Jefferson and at Hawkinson the ball than it is Madison. Now, Madison's still going to get, the handoff, some of the dump off, but I don't think it's going to be ran through him like it kind of was with Cook in the past. Now, does that mean that I don't think he's a value where he's at? Absolutely, I do. But I don't think people should expect Dalvin Cook numbers from Alexander Madison. If that makes sense?
No, but the ones he's talking about are the true number ones. They're going to get most of the,
and they're not missing 3 games.
They're not missing 3 games, and
But and go ahead. Sorry,
I don't remember what I was going to say now. Go ahead.
I'm bad, dude, man. But anyway, I mean, they're not going to miss 3 games that we know of, and that's going to take a chunk out. So, anyway.
I was going to say, I think he's going to be splitting carries between Jamal Williams more than what they're going to be probably splitting carries with whoever they're playing with.
And you're right, because they really none of those 3 guys have anybody like Jamal Williams behind them. So that's a good point also. And we're high on Michael Thomas. We're high on Juwan Johnson. We're high on Olave.
And Carr.
And we're high on Carr. And everybody can't be successful. Even with Drew Brees in his prime, he supported 2 wide receivers, a tight end, and a running back. And that was in his prime. So, I mean, and none of us are expecting Derek Carr to be Drew Brees in his prime. So, I think that's that could end up being right. I think he finishes around where those guys finish, in my opinion. So I don't think it hurts you that much. But then like Josh and I were saying before, if you do draft Kamara in that range, you got to get Josh Williams for the first 3 games because he's going to be the man, especially
Jamal
Kendrick.
Williams.
I'm sorry.
I'm not going to step on the field.
Josh, I mean, they might, if they get another running back injury though, they might call you because Kendrick Miller went down, and I'm pretty sure they were counting on using him in those first 3 games. So
now LSU's got a Josh Williams there that's running the ball.
Oh, that's what it was. The Saints signed Darrell Williams. I meant to bring that up. So that's your cousin. That's your cousin, right?
That's right.
And
our cousin.
Yeah. So they're signed some depth. And Darrell Williams was pretty relevant at Kansas City for a short time. So but anyway, Clay, I can't, you very well could be right. And there's a lot of good points on there. And, the Homer thing's for sure right. He's going to get drafted higher than he should be.
Yeah, he'll be overdrafted.
Louisiana. So at that right there probably keep me from having him in any of my leagues. But anyway, enough about running backs. Let's go ahead and roll on to our wide receivers. Josh, go ahead and give me your wide receiver bust.
All right. Well, I'm going with Mike Evans. Main reason is because he's going from Tom Brady to Baker Mayfield. I mean, that's one of the big reasons. He thrives with a quarterback throwing deep. I mean, Jameis Winston had no problem slinging it down the field, and he had some of his best years. You never knew exactly which team it was going to when he threw the ball, but he would sling it. And Baker did not do well with the vertical ball last year. Their deep ball threat in Carolina last year when he was there, DJ Moore was almost non-existent the first 5 games of the season with Baker. He actually had less than 200 yards in the first 5 games with Baker. So if you want to compare him to DJ Moore as the deep threat, he might not do near as well with Baker. Evans finished 17th last year in PPR. And on the most pass-heavy team last year in the NFL, 751 attempts.
Yep.
I don't think they let Baker throw the ball anywhere close to that.
Not even close.
And his accuracy is nowhere close to the greatest quarterback probably of all time.
I think, Yeah, go ahead. No, I was just saying, I think one of the wide receivers is relevant. And to me, I feel like it's more likely going to be the guy that lines up in the slot and runs the short routes in the middle of the field in Chris Godwin than it is going to be the guy on the outside running deep routes in Mike Evans.
Yeah, I put in here, there's no way Baker makes 2 wide receivers fantasy relevant.
No.
And I think Evans is going to be the odd man out when it comes to that.
I think he gets traded, personally. I think he gets upset, and I think they trade him. And he could be a big piece for a team going down the stretch that has a wide receiver injury or that needs some help. Honestly, I could see him going, which they're not going to trade him in the division, but somewhere like Carolina, where they could honestly use the help at wide receiver.
Go ahead and give him to KC and give him another. Super Bowl.
I mean, it could be that. He could go to Detroit if Jameson Williams doesn't pan out. I could really see Detroit being in the mix for another wide receiver because you got Amon Ra and Jameson Williams. Jameson Williams done got suspended for gambling on games already, and they're going to need somebody else. So I could see that happening. But or the Rams, if the Rams somewhat
if they're relevant.
But I like that pick a lot. I don't think Mike Evans is going to be, and not only that, Mike Evans has kind of got like a kind of a clashy attitude, and I just feel like I could see him and Baker yelling at each other on the sideline a lot.
They're both kind of hot-headed.
Yeah, I could just see them going at it. And then
another
once
thing
that happens, Baker ain't throwing them the ball.
I mean, if they're on a bad team, they're not winning. They get in arguments. There's no motivation there because you know you're going to lose the game. Well, another thing about him I was going to mention, he was very erratic last year. He was kind of hit or miss from week to week. So he only had 3 games over 100 yards last year.
Yep.
I mean, I was surprised about that. I figured he had more. But he would have a couple of games where you wouldn't even know he's on the field. And then the next game he might do pretty good. Yep. I'd rather have that consistency. I do not like players that are like that where, I mean, nobody can have 100 yards and a touchdown every game. But those that, end up with like 1 for 10 one game and then the next game they break out and then you just it's hard with those type players. But I'm afraid his 9 seasons with 1,000 yards.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to end this year.
I think it ends this year in 2023. But man,
and
hey, that's an impressive run.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. And somebody, I'm telling you, he's going, and it might not end because if he
goes to another team,
enough, it could very well keep on keeping on.
Well, he's 2 catches could be for over 100 yards because he he'd go for 60 yards on 1 catch.
Yep. And but I was just looking at some of the guys he's getting drafted ahead of. One's Terry McLaurin, which I'm about to talk about here in a minute, but another one's Mike Williams. If he's healthy, coming out with Herbert, throwing the ball a lot. Marquise Brown, who has no competition in Arizona, and Colt McCoy, honestly, is going to be throwing him the ball. And if he stays healthy, I like Colt McCoy better than I like Mike Evans because Marquise Brown doesn't have Chris Godwin.
Well, they're going to be behind in every game and have to throw it. They got to throw the ball.
Then you got Tyler Lockett in Seattle. I mean, I don't think he falls off the map. And that's another one. Smith and Jigba, that dude is getting a lot of hype for somebody that ain't played at all. And Geno has got a good chemistry with Metcalf and Lockett. And I just don't see Smith and Jigba just coming in and wiping that out. I mean, it's not like Lockett has not played a lot over the last couple of years or something, So, and then you got Drake London. I mean, you want to talk about somebody else, the head pass catcher on his team. Yeah, he's got Desmond Ridder, who's terrible, but he's also got Taylor Heineke right behind Desmond Ridder, who can chunk the rock and he can feed a wide receiver 1. And if London's one of those guys, if he falls far enough, I'll draft him, sticking him on my bench until Desmond Ridder gets benched. And as soon as he gets benched, I'm putting Drake London in there, my flex with Taylor Heineke throwing him the ball. But that's just my opinion. And then you got Brandon Ayuk. I mean, somebody that we think is probably the best wide receiver on a very high-powered offense. I just feel like these guys have a lot more upside than Mike Evans does with Baker Mayfield and Chris Godwin on the same team. So, completely agree. And a terrible offensive line, by the way. Terrible. And,
which means he's going to have to Baker's going to throw it fast.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a check down to Godwin.
Or Rashad White.
Or the running
Mike
back.
Evans. So,
yeah,
great pick. Definitely right there on the same page with you there, Josh. My guy, who I kind of alluded to just a minute ago, Scary Terry McLaurin from Washington. ADP 69.9 or 70, whatever you want to say. Well, everybody calls him Scary Terry. But honestly, what they're going to be calling him is put it in reverse Terry. Because they're going to want to go back to a couple seasons ago because I think he takes a step down this year. A new young quarterback in Sam Howell, a new offensive coordinator, and then a second-year wide receiver that had really good production last year. Not as good as Terry McLaurin's, but still that was with Taylor Heineke, not Sam Howell. And over the last 2 seasons after his breakout year in 2020, and even in 2020, he played 2 less games, but the last 2 years he's played 17 games. So 2020, he only played 15, but the last 2 years he's had 77 catches, around 1,100 yards both seasons, give or take. One was a little bit more, one was a little bit less, and 5 touchdowns. Okay. that really doesn't sound bad at all. But when you're being drafted in the middle of the 7th round with wide receivers like Mike Williams, Michael Pittman, Brandon Ayuk, who Michael Pittman I'm not as high on, but he also doesn't have Jahan Dotson breathing down his neck as the number 2 wide receiver. And the word out of camp is Sam Howell has developed a really good chemistry with Jahan Dotson and not so much with Terry McLaurin. And they've been having trouble getting on the same page where Jahan Dotson's been making plays and out catching Terry McLaurin in camp, and I believe in the first week of the first preseason game, which Terry McLaurin didn't play, Jahan Dotson did with Sam Howell, and they had several big plays together.
If I'm drafting, I'm waiting
and
several rounds and picking Dotson. I think he's a sleeper this year. I almost had him as my wide receiver sleeper.
And let me go ahead and say, this by no means is an indictment on Terry McLaurin's talent and ability by any means. It's just the role that he is on in a lower powered offense with a different quarterback and a different offensive coordinator and a young wide receiver that's developed a rapport with this new quarterback. And I mean, both of them are highly talented. I just don't know if Sam Howell can support 2 stud wide receivers. And if he develops a better chemistry with Dotson, Terry McLaurin just might be the odd man out, you know. And I don't mean that he's not going to be great, like he's not going to be a serviceable. I just don't know if he gets back to 77 catches, 1,100 yards. And honestly, the 5 touchdowns is kind of low for that kind of production, because last year in only 10 games, so he started in 10 games, he played in 12, but I know he started in 10. There was one game that he came in like the 4th quarter. It was at the beginning of the year. He didn't even hardly play till the 4th quarter. And I mean, you can't even hardly count that because he played like 2 series. But anyway, he started in 10 games. And then there was a couple of games that he got injured in the first half because I had him in my flex in my keeper league that I went down on running back so quickly. I had running back into my flex, and I ended up picking up Jahan Dotson and putting him in my flex. But he went down early in a couple games, but he still had 35 catches for 523 yards and 7 touchdowns in only 10 games last year. All right. So say he played 17 games like Terry McLaurin did. You average that out. He's had somewhere around 65 catches, 1,000 yards, and 12 touchdowns. Okay. He's not a big guy, but he just seems to get open and make big plays in the end zone. And some players are a lot better at making big plays than others. And it seems like Jahan Dotson is that guy. And that is, to me,
and he's had another year.
That's right.
Because he was a rookie last year.
Yep. 2nd year wide receiver, seemed to really break out. It just seems like that's the year when it clicks for him. And I think if Jahan Dotson breaks out, I think Terry McLaurin suffers. And I think if you're drafting him at pick 70 in the, late 7th, early 8th round, really it's the early 8th round, I just think you're going to pay a little too much for him when you can get Dotson like another 2 rounds later, and he can end up out-producing Terry McLaurin. And not only that, but if Washington ends up being terrible, who's to say they don't trade McLaurin and get some draft picks and stick with their young core of Howell and Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson. Now, McLaurin's not old by any means, but he could easily fetch a high draft pick, for a team that needs. And then, one other thing that a player that I smooth forgot about, Josh, when I was reading about all this, I've been talking about Dotson, Antonio Gibson getting involved in the catching game. I smooth forgot about Curtis Samuel that's there.
Who had a great year last year.
And he came in late, a little bit after the first couple games because he was kind of banged up coming into the year. And, Curtis Samuel's just not going away. So I just think Terry McLaurin doesn't produce as high as he did whenever he was the main guy there. They didn't have anybody else. And that's just me. I don't think he's a great value for where he's going. Honestly, like I was saying, I want to throw in there, I wish the Saints would trade for him. I say I trade Michael Thomas for him or something, but Washington's not going to do that because they're looking for draft picks. But just saying, like, I'd love to see him and Olave going out there after going at it together.
One thing about McLaurin I've seen, though, because I've had him on teams in the past,
Me too.
he is the king of garbage time.
Yep.
He might not hardly have a catch the whole game, and in the fourth quarter ends up with 3 or 4 catches for 70 yards.
That's exactly right. I had him 2 years ago, and man, I can't tell you how many times I'd look at him in the third quarter. He had 1 catch, and then the game would end, and he'd have like 7 for 80 and a touchdown. And
In the last 5 minutes of the game.
I'm like, what happened? But,
which they are going to be behind in most games. So,
but their defense is better.
Time.
And that was one thing they were talking about. Ron Rivera has been slowly signing players and developing that defense. Their defense, and if anybody forgets, he had a stud defense in Carolina when he was there. And
he's a great coach.
And I don't think he's going to have a slacker of a defense at Washington. So I think their defense is going to be better than people are going to give it credit, but they're in a tough division too. They really are. I mean,
but I believe Rivera, he wins you 6 or 7 games just on him, on his coaching.
Definitely. So, but yeah, Terry McLaurin, a little too high for my taste. I think you could do better drafting other players around that time, and then wait if you want that person in that. If you want that person for that team, I think it's Jahan Dotson as far as a wide receiver, personally. And then we're going to move on to Clay's bust pick, which is one that, another one that I'm not too keen on, but he makes some good points here. That's Cooper Kupp. One of Clay's main points, he's 30 years old. He sure is. He's had several injuries, knee, hamstring already this year, ankle last year. 35-year-old quarterback with a lot of injuries also, Matt Stafford. I'm not as worried about 35-year-old quarterback as I am the 30-year-old wide receiver. But it's a bad team in general. Now, the only thing is they're going to be playing from behind a lot, But they have
a very good offensive-minded coach.
That's what I was about to say. They have a very good offensive scheming coach. So that's the only thing that, I have a lot of faith in Sean McVay and what he's done. I mean, for Pete's sake, people have got hired as head coaches as quarterback coaches to a head coach just because they were with McVay for like 3 years, But another note Clay put here, Niners are underrated. I mean, the Niners are in his division, the underrated Seahawks D, and then defensive-minded head coach in Arizona in the division. They got a tough division, but
nobody has been able to stop
their offense.
The Stafford to Kupp connection.
That's
nobody
right.
has been able to stop that.
Yeah, and but anyway, Clay's saying there's way too many younger, very talented wide receivers in better situations in the second and third rounds. Lord, if you get Cooper Kupp in the second round, you must be living right, because I ain't seen him fall out of the first round yet. I don't know about you, Josh.
But I will say he keeps going further and further. Let me have him 9th or 10th pick.
Oh,
please.
Dude, if I can get him at the turn and draft a stud running back with him, like we said, draft Tony Pollard beginning of the second, or pair him with Amon-Ra St. Brown, dude, I'll sign up all day, every day. But anyway, then last but not least, Clay said he might finish in the top 10 still if he and Stafford stay healthy with expected volume, but a top 5-6 pick is too steep for him. So I can see that, I still think if he stays healthy, I think he could be the wide receiver 1 again. I mean, people forget he broke the record. I mean, that was 2 years ago. I mean, I know he's 30, but they also talk about how he is one of the healthiest and best in shape players in him and McCaffrey are like on a different level,
And one of the best route runners in the NFL.
Yeah, and he, some of his injuries have kind of been freak. It's not like he's out there taking shots. Like, if you watch him play, he's getting down. He's avoiding that heavy contact. And I think if, it is a big if they're both healthy. But I still think they got a good chance. I think Cooper Kupp's in that top 5 as far as players overall if he stays healthy and Stafford plays healthy.
But you could say that about half the players in the draft if they stay healthy. You can't really
or in those first
draft
2 rounds for sure.
other than a few people. You might want to stay away from, but you can't hardly draft if they're going to get hurt. You got to build your team
for a chance. Not everybody can be the number 1 fantasy player though, and he is one that can and has done it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's got the opportunity and the ability. He's got a quarterback good enough. That's something else. Like, your quarterback has to be good enough to get you to that level too. Like, you got to be good, and your quarterback's got to be good. And
well, he throws it to him every time. That helps too.
Yeah, I mean, when you're getting 15 to 20 targets a game, hey. But anyway, yeah, I can understand your reasoning there, Clay, and I definitely can see like not drafting not drafting him over Chase or Jefferson or maybe even Tyreek Hill, because Tyreek Hill finished ahead of him way up there last year. But to me personally, I take him over Stephon Diggs. Diggs has got a safe floor, but I don't think with all the talent around in Buffalo, I just don't know if Diggs can get up to that number 1 overall fantasy player like Cooper Kupp can.
No, but I think Diggs can be top 5, and I think that's somebody that's not been talked about enough.
Yeah, well, he's just
you don't really
safe.
hear,
and that's what they were talking about on a show I was watching today. He's boring because he's been so steady.
But on an offense like that, man,
he's guaranteed 100 catches, 1,300 yards, and about 8 to 10 touchdowns every year. Same thing every year.
He's what you call a safe player.
He really is.
I kind of like safe players.
Yeah. Hey, look, you don't ever have to worry about them falling off.
It's always about the upside, ain't it?
But anyway, we're gonna keep on moving on here. Josh, tell me about your bust at tight end.
All right, so don't get me wrong with this player. I really like this guy as a football player. He does it all on the field for San Francisco, but I just don't think George Kittle's going to do quite what he did last year. I can't see him getting 11 touchdowns again. He's not come anywhere close to that number before last year. Yeah. And a big thing I read was he scored 6 of those touchdowns in the 5 games that Debo wasn't playing.
Yep.
Which is big. He had below 6.7 targets for the first time since his rookie career last year. And I'm sure McCaffrey coming in had a lot to do with that. So this year, you get a full season of McCaffrey, a healthy Debo coming into the season, and an up-and-coming wide receiver in Brandon Ayuk. Yep. I just feel like he will be the odd man out. They're going to spend a lot of time having him block this year on a run-heavy team.
Mm-hmm.
I really like him. I just can't spend – I don't think he's going to end up – they have him projected as the 4th tight end.
Yeah.
I just think some of these tight ends below him maybe take a step, and I believe he falls back. Because if you give him 5 touchdowns, 6 touchdowns, he probably drops.
Yeah.
And I don't think he's going to have the yardage either or the catches. So
a lot of people think when you hear Kittle, you think you have a chance at that number 1 tight end, and I don't think that's the case anymore. No. Honestly, I think you're a lot. I'm like you. I feel like he is in that Kyle Pitts, Dallas Goedert, Pat Freiermuth area of type players, and he just doesn't have that upside anymore with the offense around him. Like, another thing that people aren't really paying attention to, Brock Purdy is struggling right now in camp and preseason. And so is Trey Lance.
Play is a question mark.
Yeah, I mean, they don't even know who their quarterback's going to be right now. Yeah, Sam Darnold has a good chance to beat both of them out.
He's actually probably looked the best.
And that's what a lot of people are. I mean, I'm not saying he will, but I've been on the Sam Darnold train since way back. I just feel like he hasn't had a decent decent coach to develop him. He's had the tools and the ability, and he's one of the smartest quarterbacks in the NFL. But he has not had a good coach since he's been in the league. The poor guy got drafted by the Jets, pretty much threw in the dumpster fire from day one, probably ruined his confidence. Didn't ever get developed. Then they send him to a brand new head coach in Matt Rule over there in Carolina, who wasn't trying to develop him, was installing a new offense. And, he's been in the league for 3 years at this point. And so, who's thinking about developing a 3 or 4 year old, 3 or 4 year veteran quarterback in the NFL? Nobody. But he still never was properly. I feel like there's a lot of untapped potential with Sam Darnold there, and it would not shock me if he surpassed both of them. Now, Kyle Shannon's already come out sticking to his guns for Brock Purdy and said the only way that anybody starts over him is if he turns to dust. Pretty much saying if he just disappears, then somebody else will start. But other than that, Brock Purdy's their guy.
Well, I think he gets a chance off of what he done last year, Now, if he goes into the season and stinks it up the first 2 or 3 games, or if they lose, and they got too good a team to lose because of the quarterback.
And that's another thing. They're coming in fully healthy. McCaffrey's healthy. Ayuk's healthy. Debo's healthy. They got tons of weapons on top of Kittle. And in the past, Kittle, like you said, has done a lot of his damage with injuries or while there's been people injured. And I think he's too expensive to draft him where you're drafting him right now. And the way I feel, like, there's several tight ends farther down that you could draft that could easily return the same value that Kittle gives you.
Well, I think, and we both think, because we're both big on this guy, I think Waller, is ahead of him by the end of the year for sure.
Yeah.
Barring injury.
Yeah.
So, you can get him, a little further down. Now, is going
they've
pretty
swapped
high.
now. The hype train's going, because now on ESPN, they're now Fantasy Pros had it back the other way. Because I looked at it earlier today. They had Kittle and then Waller. But then ESPN now has Waller going 58th and Kittle 69th. And they got Waller going 4th tight end off the board. Which
I can see
so.
that.
Yeah, rightfully so.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things like we were talking about at the beginning of the show. The people are adjusting quickly to the ADP. So we're going to keep seeing things like that. But, yeah, I think Kittle is, unfortunately, a really good real-life tight end and does a lot more that doesn't show up on the stat sheet. But, unfortunately, is a mere just average tight end at best now. And he's getting drafted on name value a lot.
Well, like you said about the rankings, that's why you don't do your fantasy drafts till later, end of August.
That's exactly right. But rolling on, I'm going to go ahead and move on to a tight end that I really liked last year, and I like him this year, but I just don't see the production out of him this year that he had last year, and that's going to be Evan Ingram for the Jaguars. Getting drafted, ADP's 86.6, so you're looking right around 10th round. He's getting drafted as the number 9 tight end off the board, getting drafted ahead of David Njoku, Tyler Higbee, Dalton Schultz, Cole Kmet. Honestly, of those guys, I like Higbee the most. Njoku's probably second for me. And then Dulcich is right down there, and I like him more than I like Evan Ingram this year. And it's not that I don't like Evan Ingram, but they added Calvin Ridley. And then not only that, Evan Ingram made it through a whole year without having an injury, really. Lord, we never thought that was going to happen. Heck, he didn't even do that when he first got drafted by the Giants when Eli was there. And that's something else. People forget how old Evan Ingram is. He was catching passes from Eli. So he's 28, which is not that old, but he was drafted. He came out when he was like 21. And but he's 28 years old. Last year, solid year, finishes the tight end 5 with 73 catches, 766 yards, only 4 touchdowns.
I'm assuming that was his best year ever, right?
Oh, yeah. Not even without a doubt, because he hasn't had a year where he played enough games for that to even matter. And
he showed signs, when he was young, rookie, but he just couldn't put it all together.
Yeah, and he honestly is in the perfect situation. But with them adding Calvin Ridley and not really,
that hurts him.
Yeah, I mean, nobody else is left. And then ETN is starting to get his grip in the passing game and to build that chemistry with Lawrence. It just took so long. I think he loses more catches from ETN and Ridley. I just, like right now, Fantasy Pros has him projected around 60 catches, 650 yards, and 3.5 touchdowns. I think that's the best case. Like, I think that's his ceiling. And that's still a good bit down from last year.
Yeah.
Because Calvin Ridley's going to demand 100 to 120 targets at least, with 80 to 90 catches this year probably. And that doesn't even count Christian Kirk coming in the slot, who was their number one last year, that got a lot of attention, and Zay Jones. You know, people forget Zay Jones had some really big games there last year.
Yeah, he did.
And he's not going away. I feel like Evan Ingram's the odd man out. I know he's a good tight end, and he's on a Doug Williams team where a lot of people forget Zach Ertz is who he is because of Doug Williams. Because Zach Ertz, like, blew up when Doug Williams was there, and that was whenever they won that Super Bowl, and I blanked on his name. Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz was feeding him the ball, and Doug Williams. I said again. Doug
Okay, Peterson. I was fixing to say.
My bad.
Yeah,
you should have stopped me there, Josh. But like, you're losing it.
Well, I thought
naming off all your cousins and naming off all your cousins.
Everybody's last name's Williams. That's right.
But anyway, Doug Peterson was there in Philadelphia whenever Zach Ertz broke out. And, I mean, he incorporates his tight ends a fair amount in his offense. But how much can you incorporate them when you have all these offensive like high-powered wide receivers, you know, on your team, and pass-catching running backs? I just think that he's the odd man out, and I would rather draft Freiermuth. I'd rather draft Higbee. And then not only that, where he's getting drafted, just some players that are getting drafted right around him: James Cook, David Montgomery, Deontay Johnson. I just can't draft Evan Ingram over those guys. And I know Deontay Johnson's probably the more unpopular one, but honestly, is a player going to have 100 catches and no touchdowns again in a season? Probably not. So, but that's
I'd rather wait a few rounds and get Higbee. I kind of like Higbee this year.
Yeah. So, but anyway, I just think his price for where you're drafting him is his ceiling, and the odds of him being able to achieve that ceiling are super low with all the things going against him. So that's why I'm just out on Evan Ingram this year. And not to mention he was healthy all year last year, so the odds are pretty good as far as statistically he's not going to be healthy this year. So I'm going to be staying away from Evan Ingram this year. And then let's go ahead and jump on to Clay's bust. And Clay's bust is going to be TJ Hawkinson. Really high flyer right there. But he's being drafted 49th overall in the 5th round. Clay says he thinks he's a great player, but he doesn't think he's going to have the kind of fantasy production that warrants a 5th round pick. And he just doesn't think he's going to be able to produce like Kelsey or Andrews or Waller 2 years ago, etc. He just doesn't think he's going to amount to that kind of production by drafting him in the 5th round. I mean, the 5th round. I think he's that next tier. I think you got too.
You got Kelsey's a tier all by itself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then I think Andrews
and Waller
and Waller's possible, and then I think he's the next tier.
Yeah,
you know,
and he's kind of in one by himself because there's really he's still really good, but I think he's better than Kittle. As far as fantasy production, yes.
Yeah. And he's on a fantasy friendly team.
Yes. And but what Clay says here, he thinks Jordan Addison is much more of a talented player, and that he thinks he's going to get what's left at what Adam Thielen left last year. And then Clay also goes on to say he could see him being a big guy that finishes as a top 5 tight end still, but just doesn't think that he's going to be a top 50 fantasy player, which is where he's being drafted.
Well, and I totally agree with that. I'm kind of looking at it like if you can't get those top 2 or 3,
that's right.
You wait.
Yeah.
Because if you look, the tight ends, the points are not a lot difference other than Kelsey,
right.
But when you get to the 4th to 12th, there's not a whole lot of difference. So, I definitely understand where he's coming from, not wanting to waste a 5th round pick on a tight end that's not going to finish number 1 or 2 or probably not 3.
And that's what he essentially says. He says he would rather wait for more of a 7th or 8th round kind of guy who he thinks Hockenson will produce like, such as a Kittle or a Pitts or a Goddard. And I completely agree. I'm still not there on Kittle, but I think Pitts and Goddard are great options.
I'm probably just waiting and trying to take a shot at one of them lower guys.
Higbee, Dulcich.
Yeah. Around 10 to 15
Johnson,
range. Yeah.
I mean, now I will say one thing that I did read about Dulcich that's got me hung up on him a little bit is Adam Troutman started over him in the preseason game. And reporters asked Sean Payton about why that was. And Sean Payton said that Dulcich has to learn how to block before he is going to start.
Uh-oh.
And that is no bueno. So we might be looking at Adam Troutman in Denver instead of Greg Dulcich currently. But honestly,
was Troutman in New Orleans when
he was?
Payton?
He was drafted.
So he already knows him. Yeah,
he was drafted by Sean Payton.
Exactly,
and he was a high draft pick.
That's going to hurt Dulcich. Yeah,
it is. And so after hearing that, I've kind of shifted gears and kind of out on Dulcich.
I'm staying away from him. Yeah,
but where I'm shifting my focus in that area is Sam Laporta, and that's that rookie out of Iowa in Detroit, taking over for TJ Hockenson. And I could definitely see him getting those catches that are vacated by Hockenson that Jameson Winston's not going to be able to take advantage. Jameson Williams isn't going to be able to take advantage of because he's suspended for 6 games. So, I mean, Amon-Ra is going to get some of them, but he can't get them all. And I think we can see Sam Laporta kind of bust onto the map a little bit. And he might be somebody else you might want to think about taking a stab at late in the draft. He's going behind Higbee, but not too far behind him. Right now, ESPN's got him at 188, which is actually a lot higher, a lot farther down than I thought. Higbee's at 129. Excuse me, 129. But Fantasy Pros, I believe they have him. Let's see.
Just take Kelsey with in the first round. You ain't got to worry about none of this.
That's true. That's true. Laporta's down at like 21 on Fantasy Pros. He's drafted behind Irv Smith. That's another one like we talked about before, Irv Smith,
Yeah.
On a high-powered Cincinnati offense. Jawan Johnson. Heck, you could even really roll the dice with the Dalton Kincaid kid from Buffalo. Somebody was telling me the other day that he's been lining up opposite of Stephon Diggs. And he's like, they've been running some 3 wide receiver sets. Well, okay. So I was reading and they were talking about this on a fantasy show. So they're running the 2 tight end package that they always run, right? But instead of Kincaid lining up on the line, it's Gabe Davis and Diggs out wide, and Laporta is like lining up in the slot. I mean, not Laporta, Kincaid, sorry, Dalton Kincaid, the number 1 tight end drafted by him this past year. And anyway, so I'm really curious to see how that works out in Buffalo. I don't know if maybe he's more of a decoy. I don't know, but he could be somebody you could take a stab at later rounds also. If, like we said, avoiding the Hockenson that early. But anyway, anybody else or anything else you want to talk about there, Josh?
No, we covered a good
I
bit.
was about to say, I think we covered a good bit. It's been a good one. And you're going on vacation next week, right?
Yep, y'all won't hear from me next week. I'm gonna be laid up on the beach studying my fantasy football, getting ready for the drafts.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be here coming at you. I'm gonna try to get 2 more pods out next week. We're gonna cover one that I really felt like I want to kind of add in there. It's not one that you used to hearing, but it's bounce back players, players that we kind of thought and really were projected to do really well last year, that just kind of fell flat on their face. And we're going to talk about some that we think will bounce back this year and kind of perform like we thought they would last year. And Clay and I are going to be coming at you with one of those shows next week, and possibly another show that Clay and I are going to discuss on some good content. I'm definitely
now when I come back from vacation, we're going to do our big preview show.
Oh yeah, we're going to go over
rankings
a lot. And I'm going to try to do at the end of next week, go over some injuries. That way we won't have to waste time on that whenever we go over our rankings. So those are some shows, a little previews coming up, guys. As always, thank you for listening. Please remember to like, subscribe, download, give us some feedback on all your favorite podcast apps. We really appreciate it. And, we just hope this has been beneficial. And if there's anything you do want to hear more about or don't, or think we messed up on, give us some feedback. We always like to hear about that, and give us a good rating on those apps. I know a lot of them have like ratings that you can give for the podcast. Give us 5 stars if that's an option. We appreciate it. And we're going to go ahead and sign off for the evening, and we'll see you next week.